Welcome to the AmericanaMusic.com podcast with your host, Sarah Popejoy.
Today we have Jesse Ray Smith. He's a singer-songwriter out of California. His sound reminds me of those famous crossovers from the 70s like Fleetwood Mac, Joe Cocker, Eagles, and Jackson Browne with a fresh take. It's not a carbon copy of that sound, but a resurgence with creative compositions, lyrics, melody, and production good enough to rival. Basically, they're just good songs. We're ecstatic to have Jesse Ray Smith. Thanks for joining us, Jesse.
Wow, what an introduction. Appreciate that, yeah.
Your site says you were born in Marin County, just outside of San Francisco. San Francisco is famous for its Haight-Ashbury counterculture movement of the 60s. Think Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Grateful Dead to our audience who may not be familiar with the counterculture movement. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how that has impacted your music today.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born in South Africa, but I came to the U.S. pretty young. I was under 2 years old and had a lot of family in California. So California was my home, specifically Northern California. So the Bay Area, when you're driving over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, halfway across that bridge, there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Marin County." So just north of San Francisco, it's a beautiful place. It's very protected. There's a lot of open land. It's where Muir Woods is. The mountain there, Mount Tamalpais, is where mountain biking kind of officially started. A lot of wildlife, kind of coastline, and so I think naturally that movement that you're talking about in the Summer of Love movement in the 60s, that era was, Haight-Ashbury, Janis Joplin, all those people you were talking about. And it really kind of one of the main linchpins of that whole movement, or one that made it so successful, a big part of it was Bill Graham, the promoter.
Yeah.
He was so instrumental in kind of like creating a model for music live experience that is kind of used today, where you have like multiple bands on a bill and all that kind of stuff. And so he lived in Marin County. His estate was up on top of a hill between Mill Valley and Larkspur. And I grew up in Larkspur and used to go to friends' houses and stuff. And it was just, so then I got a little bit more of that Laurel Canyon music of that region, which is fabric there. But there was also like a lot of recording studios that were started in the time that big bands who weren't necessarily associated with that region, but they came there and they recorded. So like Fleetwood Mac, a lot of great records were recorded in Marin. There was a studio in Sausalito called The Plant that did a lot of great stuff. Even later stuff in the 90s, like Dave Matthews Band did a couple of his big records there. Yeah, it's just a very musical place. It still is today. Even like a lot of the young bands, a lot of guys that I play with who were sort of some of the more active players in the scene. There's a lot of jazz, there's a lot of blues, really good string player, mandolins, and David Grisman, who was like a very highly regarded mandolin player. His roots are there. His kids are carrying the torch. So yeah, it's a very musical town. Fairfax is sort of like the centerpiece of it still. It's a small little town that has 3 music venues. And when I say small, I mean, I'm talking like a tiny little town where everybody knows everybody, where music is just a big part of it. And so that was my home. I grew up there. The stuff that I got involved in, the stuff that I wanted to play early on, was music that was kind of equal parts songwriting, lyrics, and then also kind of had this collaborative sort of improvisational sort of stretch your wings out, almost like bar band thing to it, like Springsteen did it really well, where he did this like super high powered bar band. And so those elements kind of are my roots. So there's definitely like a lot of classic rock in what I do, and then the California sound. And when I went to college in San Diego, I went to UCSD, people that I met were more Southern California based that I started playing with. Other side of California, the Tom Petty, the Eagles, Jackson Browne, like those sort of roots also started to kind of come into my sound.
Yeah, very cool. Where'd you go to school in Southern California?
Yeah, I went to college at UC San Diego in La Jolla. In high school growing up, I played a lot of sports. I still love sports. I wanted to sort of choose my own adventure in life. And it seemed like the people that I looked up to in school at the time were people that seemed to sort of have stuff figured out of what came next, like they really were in control of themselves. And I don't know, that isn't necessarily the coolest thing, I guess, on paper, but I don't know, that's not necessarily always been something that I cared a lot about. It was more just like, I want to do what I want to do in life. And for me, music was the number one thing. And so
Yeah.
I had to figure out how to make that happen. I don't read and write music. So a lot of that was like, I need to put myself in a position to kind of be able to figure out the other parts of what it means to be a songwriter and be able to create something that I can do with my life.
You talked a little bit in your bio about your high school days being tumultuous, talking about your mother's addiction. You said that music helped you cope. Can you talk a little bit about that if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was another reason why I chose the studious route when I was younger, is because I got to witness firsthand the other option.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm just a person who I'm willing to sort of like stare the facts in the face, and genetically a little bit predisposed to addiction. But I saw a lot of it firsthand when I was growing up. My mom was, I don't know, and I'll never know, if her decision to take me to AA meetings when I was a child was that she wanted to show me, she wanted to like pull the curtain back so that I could make good choices in life, or if she just didn't have childcare. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For her, that was her really kind of only way of coping and getting through what she needed to get through was that community, and she prioritized that. And I was not necessarily always super supportive of that. I didn't understand it. And that's something that I have, some regrets about. As a child, you can't understand why somebody can't control these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that was really hard on her. I think it was hard on our relationship, which wasn't great, but it definitely equipped me with the ability to choose a path, kind of better than she chose. And maybe I think romantically, I'll just kind of choose to think that that was her intention.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I went to college, I kind of had to sort of cope and get through her death. I was 16. She died of an overdose. And I just, music was something that we shared. That was our closest connection. But we also grew apart before that happened. Music, I think I was already on a path that I knew was my path, and it was music. When I went to college, I tried to not do music in college because I think I sort of knew no matter what I did, I was going to end up there. So I wanted to try and prove something, or I don't know what the deal was, but I did not go for music. But I ended up just going into sort of their version of like a music production type degree, and it served me pretty well. I feel like I was coming out of that really equipped to go into studio environments. I opened my own studio in San Francisco that I had for 10 years. Even to this day, it's like comfortability in that environment and just sort of being around the studio when I was in an academic place.
Yeah.
Kind of set me up for success.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. You also said your love for songwriting grew as you got older. Can you talk a little bit about that journey of songwriting?
Yeah, definitely. It started young. I remember I started playing guitar around 10. So it was around that age I started keeping journals and writing with the intention of creating songs. And I remember at a Christmas family gathering thing, I played a song that I had written. And I remember my cousin, who was older than me, kind of laughing. And it bothered me. And it sort of put me off songwriting for a little bit. I think I was just pretty sensitive. But it also made me want to get better.
Yeah.
One thing that I look back on that experience, I have friends who ask me like, oh, how did you know when music was your thing? Or my kids, they seem interested, and how do you know, blah, blah, blah. And part of me just kind of goes, if you're willing to keep going, even when it's like really painful and you want to keep getting better, that's probably a sign. And so I think that was it. It's like for me at a young age, I just wanted to keep getting better at it. I was listening intentfully at the songs and like how people that were writing good songs, what they were doing differently. And it wasn't really until there was an artist in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and I've talked about this guy a lot, but when I owned my recording studio, one of the first things I did is I just needed reps. I just need to get bands in, get the studio going and set it up. And I was actually down at a bar locally, and there was this guy playing, and I was like, man. And I went over to the bartender. I said, do you know this guy? Are these original songs? And he goes, yeah, they're all original. So I went right up to him. I'm like, hey man, if you want to come and I'll record an album for you for free. His name was Sam Chase. He's still going. He's totally active in the Bay Area, great songwriter. He came in and I just kind of, as always, I just took every opportunity I could to like really kind of pick his brain. And the one thing he said to me that stuck was, if there's ever a moment when you think that something is not good enough, or if you wonder if people will notice, you know that it's not really quite there. It's not quite what you want, but you sort of take the lazy road and you just sort of settle.
Yeah.
You just said like never settle. Settling is like when you basically are just doing a huge disservice to your art. So I took that to heart and it just forced me to kind of push through those hard moments. And sometimes that meant finding collaborators who could help me, you know what I mean? And not letting my ego or things that I thought were the way that you're supposed to write songs, or ways that like the greats did it, or any of the, you hear things like that you take to heart and then you try and mimic those things that Paul McCartney did or whatever. And it's, you kind of have to find your own route in songwriting.
Yeah.
The process ever evolving.
Definitely. Nobody wants a carbon copy of the great, this particular artist. They want to hear, something else. Why would they listen to a replica if they could just listen to the original?
Right.
Your album, Back to Yesterday. I have a couple questions. First, did you write all the songs? And then also, where did you record that album?
Yeah, so
I'm guessing you recorded it.
no, I did not. I think before I answered, I just take one step back to sort of what occurred between me owning a studio and then that record. Because there was actually a record that came out before that I did on my own. And that was recorded at the previous record was called Yolanda Station. That was my first kind of solo record. And that was really, I had just moved to San Diego. I had left a previous band and I had been in San Diego for long enough to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready. I need to find players. I want to get this thing going. But I realized at that moment that in order for me to do what I wanted to do, I needed to have it captured. So I planned a birthday weekend of mine. I called all my closest friends and flew them into San Francisco to record a record. And I wrote the songs and we recorded an entire record in a weekend. Then I just mixed it with Nate, the engineer that I had working at my studio at the time. And I released it. That record ended up just being more of like a calling card, I think, than anything, because I do feel like the next record, Back to Yesterday, was really kind of like my first release that I could proudly put a stamp on and say, like, this sort of hits all the deliverables that I wanted in my art, and on the writing side, on the playing side, on the recording art side, it kind of really did it for me. But to get to that place, I needed some people in my inner circle that I used Yolanda Station to find. And I really love Yolanda Station. I think it's a record I am really proud of, but there's depth on Back to Yesterday that I wasn't really quite ready to kind of find on my own. And I still think that it's something that, for me, collaboration, if you approach it the right way and you're open and you can kind of put your ego aside, it can unlock certain doors that are really tough to do on your own sometimes. And that's just different person to person. But I found a player in San Diego, Sean Cox Breyer. He's a guitar player that is now my right-hand man. We write all the songs together. And we've gone through that songwriting process, written hundreds of songs, and whittled it down to the few that we really thought were the ones that we wanted to put on a record. And in that process of writing all those songs, we would hit plateaus. How do we kind of keep this thing progressing? We don't want to hit like a wall. There was a point in time where we were like, let's bring in a lyricist. And so we reached out and we found a local guy that had been around the scene for a while, and we started working with him. And so a lot of the songs are actually three-way collaborations. They're all sort of came to life in different ways, but on that record, most of them are collaborations. All of them are. And then when I first started diving back into the recording process, I wanted to get together with some of the players that I had met in the Bay Area, the really kind of top players. And so I booked a room up there, went up, we recorded a couple songs, and this was just coming out of COVID. And I had a song that I felt really good about. I wanted to finish it with a producer, somebody who could kind of take my vision and really kind of find it. So what I did is I went to my record collection and I picked the 3 records. My stipulations were that it had to have come out within the last 5 years. It had to have a sound that was something that I could envision if I kind of used that thing that I can already hear on this record with my songs, it would generate something that, was what I wanted. And so the 3 records were Madison Cunningham, her first record, Who Are You Now? Brent Cobb had a record. He's kind of like a country Americana guy. And then His Golden Messenger, his early record, those three producers, I made a private link on YouTube of my song and I sent it through Instagram to them and asked if they would mix it. They all liked it. They all said they would do it. But Tyler, who ultimately became the producer of the project, was in LA. He was closer. He played a lot of instruments, so he could actually play the bass on the song that didn't have bass yet and mix it. And so we kind of started to work together. He saw the inner workings and ultimately was interested in doing a record. And that became Back to Yesterday.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, the strings on that album are really cool.
That was Tyler. Yeah, he didn't play the strings, but I would say that was definitely his influence, and I was totally up for it,
Yeah, added a lot of dimension to the songs. One thing you also said on your website was that you wanted to make a great album. What does making a great album mean for you?
I would say that since I wrote that, I would say my definition has probably changed. I think the further I've gone down the path of being a musician, the more I've come to realize that the greatness that you find in artists, a lot of it has to do with just like what you're exposed to. There's so much good stuff out there, and you find something can come into your orbit that can come to you. I mean, now it happens differently, but I've come to realize when I was a kid, so much of what I was listening to was coming through the radio. And the radio was also very regional. As a kid, you think like this is everywhere. This is what everybody's listening to. And then you kind of grow up and you realize like, wow, Chris Isaac was like actually like a Bay Area guy. He had a global hit. But a lot of the bands that were like omnipresent were huge bands in my world, like the Counting Crows and Third Eye Blind. They were like Bay Area bands. The greatness that I found in those bands, and I'm not taking anything away from any of those bands, but what I fell in love with, a lot of it was being exposed to them and just loving music and just going really deep into what they created and finding the appreciation that it meant to me. And so with that sort of new understanding and perspective of art and what I am creating, I am really, really proud of Back to Yesterday. There's nothing about that record that I would change other than really who it was able to reach. And so as I move forward as an artist, I think the way that I approach my art and my craft is not to change what I'm doing, but just to keep doing it and keep being myself, which is, I think, naturally a positive person and an inclusive person. Just trying to put myself in positions to grow my network and play more and reach more people, and it'll just sort of keep going. But the stuff that I have right now that's done, that I'm ready to release, I feel really good about on very similar level to the Back to Yesterday stuff.
That's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's a really great album. Born of Fire, nominated in Best Video.
Nominated for 2 categories, which was, yes, Best Video for Born of Fire, but then the album got nominated for Best Americana Album of the Year.
Cool.
Neither of those categories did I win. I've had, I think through the course of a career, there's lots of moments that are exciting and ultimately are letdowns, but they're still important.
Yeah.
I'm still very proud of the project. I'm equally proud of the people that I worked with and the process. That video for Born on Fire, I created with a good friend of mine. We've become very close, named Matt Powers, and he's done all my videos for me in the last few years. Whenever you meet people that they kind of come into your orbit, you just know that whatever you do together is going to yield something special. I have gotten to a point now where that is my ultimate goal always, is just try and keep those people around. Having not experienced or felt that feeling before, like I did with the Back to Yesterday record, where I call them, what's the term I used to use? If you could do it again, that you would change. Oh yeah, the if onlys. I didn't have with Back to Yesterday, there weren't any of those like if only moments. Like if only we had a better studio, or if only I had a better producer, or if only I had a better band or a better microphone or whatever. And I really truly felt like the end product represented that for me. To have that experience and for it to sound like I had hoped it would, and to be inspired by what I was listening that was my own. Yeah, that's a really special experience. And once you feel that, you don't want to feel anything else.
That's awesome. Another statement I saw that I thought was interesting is you said that your best work has always come in times of need. Can you expand a little on that?
Yeah.
You mean in terms of like songwriting or?
Yeah, songwriting. And I think that still holds up. I was sort of going through my mind and thinking about, the other statement that I made about making great work and how that sort of evolved. This one I don't think has really changed. I still think it's true, but need is a little bit fluid. I think back when I was younger, the need was the sort of cathartic escape and the pain and sort of working through all of that. Music was a thing for me as a kid that I was just enamored by it. But once it was there, once it was something that where that process of I could lose myself in it, and it could also be a source of reflection for me. Yes, it definitely, there were times where I needed that. As I got older and now in my life, I have a really loving family. I'm definitely living my best life. So need is a different thing for me now. I've reached a point as an artist now where when I sit down to write a song, the need now is for me to feel like I'm expressing something that speaks on behalf of the greater need. For me, what that represents, I think we're in a time right now where we need positive energy.
Yeah.
People to lean into the things that make them feel love and encouragement. We need to get away from apathy and stagnation, which is the death of positive growth. I think that people want all that stuff, but it's really easy to give up. For me, I've just leaned into love and pain. They run sort of hand in hand. And when you lose love, you feel pain. And so I've written a lot of songs about that battle. But as I've kind of gotten older now, think about what are the experiences that I have day to day that move me to the point of if I just think about them that I get emotional. Like those moments are things that you hold on to those and you can sort of like stick that flag in the ground and say like, okay, this is something that is really meaningful. It matters to me. And so I'm going to write about this. I'm going to create a song that will allow other people to also kind of stick that flag in the ground, maybe give them the encouragement to sort of share those moments or to say like, this is meaningful to me too. And just kind of like giving people the opportunity to sort of live their best life is kind of where I'm at now.
Your latest single, The Show, which I love that song. That's actually what introduced me to your work.
Excellent. It only came out 4 days ago.
Yeah.
So this is quick turnaround. I love it.
It's a very quick turnaround. Yeah, I was listening to someone else I was going to be interviewing. So I like to have, obviously, not just know their music, but have a good knowledge of it. And it helps when I'm trying to describe it, too, to really kind of get it inside. And then a lot of times Spotify will give you someone after, and it's like, But your song, The Show, came after, and I was like, what is this? I mean, I've been listening to it to prepare for this, but I just really, really think that's a great song. Just so you know, it's from a critical songwriter. So anyways, not critical. Maybe that's not the word, but you know what I mean.
A discerning ear.
Okay, thank you. That's much better. That's a lot less negative.
That's the one sort of magical thing about music, right? Is like everybody's allowed to be a critic because it's all just about what it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, there's people out there that are going to feel nothing from my song, and that's fine. I have no judgment, you know what I mean? But it is very meaningful to me when it does mean something. And that song in particular comes from a very genuine place. So Sean, my collaborator, so we wrote that one. We went into sort of songwriting mode. Okay, we've got some dates on the books. This is sort of a time of need. We need some songs. Mm-hmm. It's kind of inductive in the way where it's like you put the dates on the books just far enough out that it creates that sort of sense of need so that you do the work and you get through. It forces you to sort of really hone in. And so this was one of our sessions. We got together in the garage and his wife was pregnant and they were going to have their first daughter. And I have 2 daughters. It was sort of the way that he approached kind of like a framework because we would each bring songs to the table and we would write them sort of separately and bring them to the table and then work our way through the sticking points and stuff like that. So this was one that he brought. It was just verse lyrics, but it was this kind of like a story that you would tell your child later on in life. You would kind of offer them some wisdom, a time capsule that they can look back on and sort of, oh yeah, now I get it. I'm experiencing that it's like this really sort of winding road that life is, and there's pain and there's joy, and ultimately you hope you find somebody that can make you feel like you belong. And I wrote the chorus. So that was the sum, was for me, was kind of getting to a place where that journey was summed up by that feeling of belonging. And there's a sort of inherent sense of community there. Funny enough, I don't know if you got a chance to see the video.
I did.
Those kind of old-timey shots that are in the video, those are actually my wife's family. Her dad, he's like kind of one of the bigger kids in the sort of father figure in the group, wrestling the younger kid, playing baseball. His father was the one running the camcorder. Those are like very authentic family shots. And I was so fortunate to have those come into my life just before the song was finished. And I saw them. He had a box of tapes that he sent off to a company that sort of digitizes stuff. And he got the little flash drives back. I walked in to his place and he was sitting there looking at him on the computer. I was like, what is that? And he goes, oh, it's just the camcorder footage from my dad. And it had shots of his mom. And there's such a tight-knit family. And I was lucky enough to meet all the extended family and to get that footage in there. It really means a lot.
It was really cool footage. It fit the video perfect.
Yeah, it was very organic the way that happened. My buddy Matt, who does my videos, he lives just a town over. When it comes to creative endeavors, I'm very much not a planner. I like to sort of let the universe guide, and he's the opposite. I'll call him up and be like, hey man, let's get out there and shoot some video this week. And he'll sort of push me to come up with timelines, and it never happens. Then the day comes and it's like, let's just go meet down at the beach. And we'll pull into the parking lot and I'll have a pile of clothes in my car. And in this instance, Sean was just about to get married. I had the suit, the brown suit that I was going to wear in his wedding. It was brand new and I liked it. I had just put it on. There was a tunnel over near the beach that cuts through to the lagoon. I had walked through it before and it's a very kind of interesting shaped tunnel. It's like kind of like an octagon almost. I had the image in my mind. It's like one of those things that sort of pops in your head when you're sort of like doing the dishes or whatever. And then you just sort of file it away like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. So we didn't have any direction. I was like, oh, let's go over to that tunnel and just get some shots over there. And he said that, just as soon as I started playing that song, it just felt right. And that's all we had. And then I saw the footage of the family stuff and I immediately knew that was what it was missing. Because just the tunnel alone, it wasn't enough. I needed something else. It just worked so perfectly. And Matt's eye is incredible and he just made it all happen.
Jesse, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I encourage everyone out there to go listen to Back to Yesterday, but listen to the show. It's all really, really great stuff. Check out Jesse Ray Smith's music and watch his videos and go out to his shows. So thank you so much, Jesse.
All right. Awesome. One last thing. In 2 weeks, I got another single coming out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Called Santa Ana Wind.
Here's a short clip to next week's interview with J.M. Stephen.
My dad cut off all music at Bo Diddley. Anything after Bo Diddley, he was not interested in. He called it the big beat, and he was always saying, one day it's going to come back, and it's going to crush heavy metal that you guys are listening to.